Welcome. In this screencast, we take a look at what the equals relation means. There's a lot that happens when you write that equals sign. There's a lot of things that you say, and there's a lot of consequences to that sign once you say it. Equals is a relation. It means that the thing you write on the left side and the thing you write on the right side represent the same quantity. They are equivalent. They represent the same number. There are lots of ways to say that. The idea is the idea of a balance scale. Both things that we say are equal will balance a balance scale. And there are consequences to that. So let's talk about some properties. We say that the equals relation is reflexive. And by reflexive, we mean that every number is equal to itself. That has to be said, even though it is plain Jane obvious, it has to be said. We also say that the equals relation is symmetric. And by symmetric, we mean if you see somewhere that A equals B, then you can conclude that B equals A. That's not a small thing. When you were in high school algebra, you probably flipped those things back and forth because, well, they're equal. Well, there's a property mathematically that says you can do that, and that property is the symmetric property. We also say that the equals relation is transitive. By transitive, we mean if you see somewhere that A equals B, and you see somewhere that B equals C, then you know that A equals C. The equals relation is transitive. Not all relations are transitive, but equals relations are transitive. You are also familiar with some properties of the equals relation. For example, if you see somewhere that A equals B, then you know that adding C to both sides of that equation doesn't change the value. Doesn't change the relationship, rather. It does change the value. You've added C, but it doesn't change the equality. If we add C to each of two equal things, the results are equal. Similarly, we can play this game with multiplication. If you know that A equals B, then you know that A times C equals B times C. If you multiply two equal things by the same number, then the results are equal. And these properties go in both directions, which is to say, if you were to know that A plus C equals B plus C, you would conclude that A equals B. If you know that A times C equals B times C, and C is not 0, then you know that A equals B. Speaking of 0, let's talk for a moment about the zero product property. The zero product property says if you have a product and that product is equal to 0, then A equals 0 or B equals 0. And I'll just point out that this is the mathematical OR. And in the mathematical OR, A could be 0, B could be 0, A and B could be 0. If A is 0 and B is 2021, the product is still 0. If A is 2020 and B is 0, the product is still 0. If A and B are both 0, the product is still 0. So when we say or in a mathematical sense, we mean that one is 0 or the other is 0 or they're both 0. This is the property that you use in Algebra 1 when you solve quadratic equations. You factor them, you get two factors, and then you set each factor equal to 0. Why? Because of this property. These are the properties that we use when we solve equations. These are the properties that we use, like if we're going to solve 3 times n equals 12. Well, okay, this is the stuff you did in Algebra 1. I want to get n by itself, so I want to get rid of the 3. Well, how do we get rid of the 3? Well, we divide both sides by 3. Well, why does that work? Well, that works because on this slide back here, we learned that if you have this product, then you can conclude, if you have these equal products, then you can conclude this over here. So 3 times n equals 3 times 4, divide by 3, n equals 4. You use these properties all the time without thinking about them. But when you become a teacher, you have to think about them because some kid is going to ask, how come I can do that? And you want to have an answer that's better than because you can. Okay, in a second video for this lesson, I will solve some equations from back in algebra land, and they will bring all sorts of memories flooding back over you, and we'll take a look at patterns and structures, and that's the whole point of the first couple of weeks of our course.